Ezra, when you were first speaking about the talk you gave today, you talked about internet freedom of speech. Do you see an internet minister in the future of Canada?
Well, the internet is already covered by the Canadian Human Rights Act, and they have jurisdiction over what they call hate speech on the internet. So we're already under the thumb of these censors. I think the CRTC might try and legislate and regulate even more, but there is no freedom on the internet. Now, the internet is a great tool because you can publish a website from any jurisdiction, and so you can escape these censors sometimes. But the Canadian Human Rights Commission goes after people on the net all the time.
And do they, if you lived in another country, could they compel you to come here and testify?
No, they couldn't. I mean, they could try to, but they never have, and I doubt another country would comply with that, since it's such a heavy-handed thing. But if you're a Canadian, whether or not you publish a Canadian website or on a U.S. website, if you are in this country, they will come after you.
Okay, so if you were in a foreign land and then you came to Canada, would they harbor that resentment and then capture you when you arrive?
I really don't know. They might. I mean, they're so capricious in how they apply the law. I think it would come down to the personal biases of the Human Rights Commission investigator at hand. So I certainly wouldn't want to say no, because they'll do anything, it seems to me.
Indeed. You mentioned a couple of times that you were the first person or the first publication to put these cartoons in print in North America. Are you aware that the University of Prince Edward Island newspaper also printed them and received a lot of flack?
You're right. Let me clarify. We were the first corporate media of any size in Canada. The University of PEI did it, a small Jewish newspaper in Calgary did it, and but I don't think any magazine with any wide readership, and certainly no TV station or daily newspaper, did. Since then, the National Post ran a tiny little cartoon of it, and I think Le Devoir might have as well. But back then, no one of any size did, and I salute those students at PEI who did so.
Yeah.
Now, some in America did, but none of the big media, not even the New York Times, not the Wall Street Journal, not even National Review. So the States was almost as bad as Canada.
How does this story continue to have legs? Like, are you supporting it, or is your opposition supporting it? I don't just mean the human rights commissions, but also the people who allege to be offended by your publication.
Right. Well, I tried to get out of this in March of 2006 when I wrote a letter to the Human Rights Commission telling them they really didn't have the jurisdiction here. They should let me go. They didn't take my invitation to end this. They went after me for another 900 days. So they were in charge of that. Now, since then, I thought, well, I don't want them to have the last word. I'm going to write a book about it. But that's just my story. There are a lot of stories out there, because these 14 human rights commissions across Canada, they continue to prosecute people all the time.
Do you see yourself like a de facto champion, sort of like Richard Pryor, Woody Allen, El Presidente, falling from the tree and into the crowd, and suddenly you're the champion? Do you see yourself like that?
Well, I didn't request this role. Like I said, as soon as I got hit with the human rights complaint, I wrote a very polite letter telling them why they shouldn't come after me and why they should let me be. But they chose not to do so. So I was conscripted into this fight by the other side. I think they made a mistake in doing so, because I'm more stubborn than your average respondent. So I fought back harder. And now that I'm here, now that they've wasted so much of my time anyways, I may as well continue the fight.
Yeah. Why did the Western Standard why couldn't it continue and keep itself going?
Well, we lost money from our first year of operations, and this cartoon business didn't help us much. In the end, it was just an economic situation. We just were losing too much money.
Okay, and a question about faith, because I'm unfamiliar with the semantics of faith, and that is people who are against Jewish people are often called anti-Semitic. Is it possible to be Jewish and not be Semitic?
You know, the word Semitic refers to a group of languages, I think. The word anti-Semite was sort of an invented word. It was in the 19th century, I believe, that tried to give being anti-Jewish a more scientific or polite word. So being anti-Semitic actually doesn't have any real meaning if you look at the root of it. It's just a term that was invented to be anti-Jewish. And some people have tried to mean, oh, it's against any of the Semitic peoples, but it doesn't make sense. The word was a specific invention in Europe to deodorize Jew hatred by giving it a respectable name.
Right, and so I guess reverse the question: is it possible to be an Arab and not a Muslim?
Yes, it is. There are Christian Arabs. For example,
secular Arabs?
Yes, I mean, for example, in Lebanon there are plenty of Christian Arabs. In Egypt, I think about 10% of the population is Christian, Coptic Christian Arabs, and even some Palestinians are Christian Arabs. Likewise, you can be a Muslim and not an Arab. For example, Turkey, they're Turkish Muslims, and Iran, they're Persian. So neither of those countries are Arab.
Interesting. And what's the essence of your free speech battle? Religious freedom? Is it like freedom of speech? Like what?
Well, for me, it was the right to publish my magazine without having some radical imam tell me what to do. And then it became the right to publish my magazine without having the government tell me what to do. The fact that he was a radical Muslim gave it a certain flavor because it, that made it even more offensive to me that this fellow from Pakistan with Saudi values was trying to take over our liberal Western justice system. But it was just me trying to publish my magazine without being bossed around.
And so these unaccountable agencies that have been created. Is that you?
Yes, that's it. Let's ask two wrap-up questions.
Yeah, okay. Two wrap-up questions, okay. So let's get right to the end. How about this question? Why don't you simply publish the whole names, why don't you simply publish all the names of the hundreds of persons who are employed by the human rights? Why don't you just publish a book list? Books of lists are very popular. I'm sure they'd sell, and then they wouldn't be able to go about their anonymous.
Well, I think that the real responsibility lies with our legislators, our politicians, to change the law. Frankly, if someone's just a bureaucrat working for a Human Rights Commission, they're just doing what the politicians have given them a mandate to do. And while I'm very mad that someone would want to be a censor when they grow up, and be a censor for a living, at the end of the day, the responsibility is with our politicians who have created these laws.
We have about 7 minutes. She just flashed me that, and so taking that stance that they're just doing their job, that sounds very Nuremberg. And let's not forget that.
No, I'm not letting them off the hook. I'm just saying, I want to, and I am very critical of many of the staff of these human rights commissions. But to me, the main focus is the bosses, the people who created these laws, who are responsible for oversight of them. I'm not excusing a censor, especially some of the bullies that work for these commissions. I'm just saying that we should go after the big fish first. And so I'd rather publish a list of every justice minister in the country and every politician in the country who lets this happen, rather than their staff. It's the bosses who are allowing this to happen.
So do you think that the entire media is a placebo for that the government allows to feed us? Like, why does it exist like it does?
Well, they've started to go after the media. Western Standard was the media, McLean's and Mark Stein were the media, so the Human Rights Commissions, their appetites have grown. They've feasted on little folks who don't have lawyers, aren't big fish, don't have money, don't have power, and they've started going after magazines. And they'll continue to have their appetites grow as long as they're permitted to exist. That's why we've got to abolish them.
Right. And this will be the final question, and it's a personal one because I have a camera.
Sure.
I find myself worried about the day when I'm standing in the lobby of an airport, much as we are today, and an incident such as we've seen played out recently since last year in Vancouver with poor Mr. Jacansky and his death. If I was there with my camera and captured that, I see myself as being threatened by all sorts of agencies. Is part of your fight my fight too for that?
Well, yeah, it's made me more of a civil libertarian. It's made me more skeptical of government power. It's made me more concerned about people who are being ground down by a very big government agency. So it's made me more sensitive to anyone who comes into contact with the state in a conflictual way. So yeah, it's made me more of a libertarian, even for causes that it hasn't made me soft on crime or anything. It's just made me much more sympathetic to anyone who is charged or with anything by the state. I really want to look at it from their point of view also. I'm not going soft on, there are some bad guys that we want the state to be tough on, but I really want to look carefully to make sure it's not a political vendetta or an abusive process.
Right. And do you see yourself taking on other quasi-legal agencies like WCAT, WCB, which there are
I hope
14
not,
of,
because
and things like that?
I want to have a real life where I do real things instead of being a crusader. But this is one fight that I think I have to finish. I was dragged into it, and I have a duty to fight. I mean, I'm off the hook myself, but I think there are other folks that I got to stick around and help out too. I'm not looking to be a permanent troublemaker, but these guys wanted to fight, so I got to end it.
And what is your real life?
I'm a lawyer and a journalist and a dad, so those are things I want to work on other than fighting against the government full time, but I'm not going to give up yet.
And the very last question, you mentioned being on Oprah. Would you like to be on Oprah with your book?
Well, I mean, it would be good publicity. I don't know what she thinks about civil liberties. I never watch her, but I know that she has a big audience, so sure, I'd go on the show.
All right. Thank you very much for your time today. Appreciate it.
Cheers. Well, thanks for coming all the way up to the airport in such a race.